inspection services position per Assistant City Attorney St. James. Note proposed organizational chart for Agenda 4.01, resolution, update the staffing structure of Public Works, Water Resources Division, Board of Finance, per HR Manager Reed. Note the response summary document for this agenda item per Megan Moore. Remove from the consent agenda item 3.37, Communication, City Attorney's Office, Annual Report on Livable Wage Ordinance, FY19, and place it on the deliberative agenda. This item 2 per Assistant City Attorney St. James.
Second. Motion made by Councilor Mason, seconded by Councilor Roof. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. And once again, welcome to new councilors for your first full meeting of the City Council. Councilors Freeman, Franklin, and Hanson. You just had your first full vote of the City Council, unanimously. They might not all be unanimously going forward. So with that, we have the agenda, and the second item on the agenda is the public forum. So we'll open the public forum tonight. I have 2 people signed up so far. If anyone else would like to speak in public forum, there are sheets over here on the table. Just bring them up to the clerk's office over here, and they'll get them to me. So we'll open the public forum with Joe Scrimenti, to be followed by Lulu Zerzetti. Good evening. Welcome. I don't know if did I butcher your last name?
Yeah, nailed it. Yeah.
All right, then the credit goes to Councilor Mason.
Sorry.
No, he said it was good. And you have a lighting system there. You have 3 minutes. The middle light will tell you there's about a minute left. Then the red light means you have to wrap your comments up.
Thank you so much. I'd like to say welcome to all the new counselors. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Pull the microphone right in close to you.
Got it. Thank you. My name is Joe Scrimenti. I'm a sophomore at UVM, and through work on city council campaigns and local activism with 350 and the Sunrise Movement, I am deeply invested in this city. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, and I've been by voter rights and voter suppression my entire life, with my father having run nearly a dozen grassroots campaigns for mayor and state house seats. I moved to Burlington because of its liberal and innovative reputation. I've come to realize that this may have been true at one point, but the city has fallen prey to neoliberalistic ideals in recent years. Burlington must live up to its reputation and be a city at the forefront of liberal ideas and democracy. An effective way to achieve this is ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is an increasingly common election method that allows voters to rank candidates in order of preference. These rankings ensure that as many voters as possible will help elect a candidate they support. Ranked choice voting is currently being used in 13 cities across the country, including Amherst and Cambridge, Mass, and the entire state of Maine. Compared to our current system, Burlington would benefit from ranked choice voting in many ways. Voters are given more choices and are not forced between the lesser of 2 evils. Third parties are given a better chance to win, and it also decreases the impact of money in politics. A Rutgers study found that with ranked choice voting, friendlier campaigns were much more effective in achieving voter preference. Additionally, the voting rights organization Fair Vote states, candidates who have won in ranked choice voting elections have been successful because they built grassroots outreach networks. To continue, a report co-authored by Fair Vote and the New America Foundation found that racial minority populations also prefer ranked choice voting. Lastly, a University of Missouri study shows that when compared to the elections they replace, ranked choice voting elections are associated with a 10-point increase in voter turnout. In conclusion, ranked choice voting gets rid of several of the problems with our current system and is more democratic. I'd like to see this council put this issue to the voters, and if it follows, I will gather this on the ballot. If we want Burlington to be a truly democratic city at the forefront of liberal policy, ranked choice voting is the next step forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lulu Zerzetti is the next speaker and our final speaker. And was that the correct?
No, it's Luke Zarzecki.
Luke. Okay, thank you. That looks like Lulu. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Mason.
Yeah.
Okay, so penmanship may not be your strong suit, but
No, it's
public speaking, maybe. You have the floor.
Hi, my name is Luke Zarzecki, and I'm a student at UVM. When I go down to the waterfront as a native English speaker, I can understand the signs placed by the city of Burlington. If there's too much algae in the water and the signs say not to swim, I know that I should swim. In the winter, when I'm walking, signs warning me about drugs, I know to be careful. However, if I didn't speak English, then how would I be able to read these warnings? According to city data, 5,500 Burlington residents are speakers of a non-English language. Burlington brands itself as a city that is welcoming of people from all across the world. And I come from Chicago, and I feel very welcome. But I am also an American that speaks fluent English. How would someone from Bhutan or Bosnia, which are two of the highest places of origin for global diversity in Burlington, understand the warnings and signs if they aren't in their native language? Many of our signs are also in French. However, French is the 6th most spoken language in Burlington. We need more signs in Indic languages, which are the most commonly spoken languages other than English. And we need signs in Spanish and Serbo-Croatian. How are our citizens supposed to understand the dangers that the city warns them about if the signs aren't in their native language? By putting these signs in different languages, perhaps there will be people rush to the hospital from swimming in toxic water. This is not only an issue to make Burlington more inclusive, this is also a safety issue. It is not enough to have signs in English and French. We need to make signs that have all languages represented by the people of Burlington, especially danger warnings. I visited Montreal a few weeks ago. I am not a French speaker, and it was hard for me to understand the parking signs, the warning signs, the menus, because I didn't know the language. Luckily, I don't live in Montreal. If I did, I couldn't imagine being able to get around and knowing what I was able to and not able to do. How are new immigrants in Burlington supposed to understand what is going on if the signs aren't in their language? We have people all across the world that come to live in Burlington. They pay taxes, and they should be able to see signs in different languages, in their own language. If Burlington is going to brand itself as a welcoming city, accepting people from all over the world, the least the city can do is put up signs, especially danger signs, in languages that all citizens can understand. Thank you.
Luke, appreciate that. That concludes the public forum tonight, and we'll move us on to the next item, item number 3, which is the consent agenda. Motion by Councilor Busher.
Do you want me to make the motion, or?
Councilor Busher, I'm recognizing you
Thank you.
for whatever it is you want to do.
Yes. Okay, I'd like to move to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated.
Councilor Busher has made the motion. Councilor Roof seconds it. All those in favor of passing the consent agenda and taking the actions indicated, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. And we are on to the deliberative agenda, and that's item number 4.01, a resolution update to staffing structure of Public Works Water Resource Division. Director Spencer and Megan Moore. We had a work session on this last week and just discussed this at the Board of Finance, and now we'll hear from Chapin and Megan again.
Thank you very much, President Wright. Thank you to the full council. Appreciate the time that you gave us last week for the council work session and tonight at the Board of Finance. So there was a strong representation of the council at the Board of Finance. We won't retread on much of my remarks. We do have the presentation loaded up if there's anything that we want the full council to look at. But we are here to respond to a number of your questions, and we appreciated the breadth of the questions on public engagement, on successful stewardship of our water quality, and on phasing. And with that, I'll offer to Megan to say any opening remarks, and then happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chapin, and thank you to all of you for attending the work session last Monday, spending time with us tonight at the Board of Finance. We completely understand that there is a cost involved with adding the staff and doing the reclassifications that we're proposing. I do not bring these to you lightly. As a Burlington ratepayer myself, and as somebody who is deeply concerned that even though we don't have a very high delinquency rate with our water billing, with our water bills, that doesn't mean that people aren't making hard decisions and potentially not buying groceries or not buying prescription medicine so that they can pay their water rates. With that in mind, and we go back to FY19 budget resolution. Thank you, Councillor Shannon, for pointing out I had a minor typo. When we went back and did our research, Chapin and I certainly recalled, because there was a lot of conversation, that in FY19 we needed to bring back to the council in advance of FY21 some alternative rate structures, look at affordability programs, have a whole stakeholder involvement process. We have been proceeding as if that had been in the budget resolution, and the packet that I had sent out last night, attachment B, was the request for qualifications that we issued in January to hire a consultant to in fact help us do that work. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that that was something we were already committed to. While the impacts of these positions over phase
I apologize. Megan, could you pull the microphone in right close, please, so we can hear you better?
While the impacts of phase 1 and phase 2 are, as proposed, going to hit the FY20 budget, and while I understand there are concerns given that people voted to potentially add up to $5 overall as the result of the clean water, the infrastructure bond that we passed in November, I wanted to remind folks that the $5 that we mentioned is at the end of when everything has been built. And so that money, those cost increases will be phased over the next 4 to 5 years, and it's not that they're going to all be hitting in FY20 as we start to construct things. The clean water funding that we're leveraging, you don't start paying back on that until a year after a project is complete. And so those costs aren't going to hit us. However, they are ultimately going to hit us, which is why we believe the FY21 budget process is the right time to be really scrutinizing if there's different things that we can do with our rate structure that will minimize the impact to residential users. I think I'll stop there.
Councillor Shannon.
I just want to clarify if you mean the FY21 budget or the FY20 budget.
I mean the FY21 budget.
So a year from now,
yep,
we're going to be...
Largely because of the amount of work and analysis that is involved in order to answer the questions that we know you guys are going to pose, which is, okay, if you help out the low-income residential user, how is that going to affect businesses, vice versa? We have to model all of that, go through various alternatives, bring them to ratepayers, understand what ratepayers are really struggling with, and which programs would actually help them. Perhaps people are more interested in affordability programs where we give discounts, or technical assistance programs. There's a whole host of ways in which we can help our ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shannon. Councillor Powell.
Thanks very much, President Wright. So we had a lively conversation and a very informative one at the Finance for quite some time, and as a result of much that was discussed, we determined that we would be advancing this to the council without a recommendation from the Board of Finance. So we didn't take a vote, for those who weren't there, just so you know. One of the things that, I think in some of the points that you're mentioning right now, Megan, were mentioned at the very end of our conversation. So we didn't have the benefit perhaps of hearing these at the outset. One of the other things that was mentioned, and it was mentioned by the mayor, and since the mayor is not here right now, I think it's worth everyone also hearing that, the mayor in the State of the City address had mentioned that even though the voters did overwhelmingly approve the tax increase, he appeared forth that would not have that tax increase in it, thereby saving the taxpayers about $30, the average taxpayer about $30 a year, which granted is not the increase that you're talking about, but it is significant. And so I think that also bears worth repeating, so that for those people who weren't there an hour ago, you're hearing it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Councillor Mason, then Councillor Roof.
Thank you, President Wright. Megan and Chapin, can you know, there's a lot of talk, as everyone knows, the budget's not here. Can you just sort of speak to, and there may be an amendment coming forth, why are we dealing with this now, tonight, and not as part of next year's budget?
Great. Thank you, Councilor Mason. We've been looking at this, and thanks to the charge of the Board of Finance to do this work, to do third-party assessment of operations. When the legacy issues hit of the billing errors and then the plant upsets of last summer, our ability to respond effectively and efficiently to those was compromised by our staff capacity. With the additional capital projects going on and our efforts to respond to those legacy issues, it became apparent to staff that we were not optimally resourced to tackle those. We brought forward the third-party study. We've done that work. We proposed a phasing to honor the fact that we are now before the FY20 budgeting process. That said, our recommendations that have come from the consultant and that we have tweaked and massaged do reflect the proposed FY20 impact in our budget. For FY20 is proposing approximately a 4.5% rate increase, about half of that the result of Phase 1 and Phase 2 recommendations. The reason we wanted to move quickly and not wait for the approval for FY20 is because we have two things going on. First, two of our senior staff members will be on personal leave this summer, and it was important for us to have the new staff in place and trained before those leaves. And second, we wanted to be able to take advantage of as much of this construction season as possible so that we could deliver a number of the capital improvements lined up to address stormwater and wastewater issues before this construction season ends.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mason. Councilor Roof.
Thank you, President Wright. This is a question that I'd asked before. I asked that last week at the work session. I think it's important for folks to hear. Excuse the ask again, but could you just talk a little bit about the direct staff outreach that went into developing this proposal?
So Revitalization, the independent consultant, met with, I would say well over 80% of the staff or staffing groups. Each of the staffing groups had representatives at various meetings, generally about an hour and a half long, examined various project lists that we had, any other SOPs that we've been developing, and were, familiar with some of the legacy challenges that had hit us recently. Additionally, because there were some questions about union involvement, because there are union positions that are affected by these reorgs, we had a good meeting with union leadership on March 21st, in which we went over the entire Revitalization report in advance of the report, in advance of giving them a full copy, so they at the same time that you guys did. And then specifically with union bargaining unit work groups, had specific meetings with them to make sure they understood what was involved. So we met twice with the distribution metering folks. The change for that is to take the 3 of the existing 11 folks and move them over to the customer care. We've got good feedback on that they thought that there could be real benefits to doing that. We also met with the customer care group, since they were having some changes. Specifically, we drew the union's attention to the fact that while we were moving one position out of the union, the billing administrator, to the customer care finance manager, we are adding a customer care level 2, and then also in Phase 2, a wastewater operator in training. And I think that's probably part of the reason we got a lot of good engagement with them.
A follow-up to the point, Director Spencer, that you just made about timing. I think we're going to get into this in a minute, so I might be preempting a little bit, but I ask for forgiveness in advance. Is there any risk? Could you just unpackage that a little bit more for me? What, if any, risk, maybe I'll ask it this way, would be associated with a delay of even just 2 weeks? Would that, you talked a little bit about hiring. Are there any system operation or performance risks that we need to be contemplating when thinking about that? Because you have been operating on a timeline, and I'm open to a delay and a postponement, but I'd like to fully understand what risk we may be considering.
Great. I'll start it off and then hand it over to Assistant Director Moyer. The document that Megan sent along yesterday, responding to a number of your questions, included an attachment that able to tell support the risks that are being managed through the additional positions. And yeah, it's attachment C in what was sent out, and I think it well describes the risks that we are seeking to mitigate. With the water resources engineer, a lot of it gets to the wastewater treatment plant and the industrial pollution prevention work. The upsets of last summer are something we do not want to repeat. We are working as quickly as possible on the clean water resiliency plan. Thank you, Lori, for posting that. And we need this staff person here to assist us in advancing those as expeditiously as possible. And Megan, why don't you talk to the next two?
Well, I guess also I wanted to say that.
And just one more. Can you both, please, when you're speaking, pull the microphone right in close to you? You're drifting off a little bit as you speak, and we're missing it. So please keep the microphone right close to you.
One of the additional things I wanted to say, you know, in a perfect world with time, I'd be looking out a year or two, right, and thinking, what do I need in 2 years, and be hiring those folks now. A lot of the issues that we're dealing with are backlogged issues, right, as well as we are adding some of these positions that address both backlogged issues, current issues, as well as future-facing issues. And so I guess that's probably some of the reason for wanting to move quickly. Hiring takes at least 8 to 10 weeks. Our first leave is happening in mid-July, and having contact time between existing staff before those other staff come in. Right now, and we would figure out a way to do it, I don't know, our stormwater program would have nobody there to manage it if we can't get some of these positions in fairly quickly. That being said, as Director Spencer, you know, we will be okay for the next 2 weeks. It's just we really, really would like to get started with hiring these folks and kind of building our new organization, and also helping morale. It's been a tough 2 years, I will admit. And you would talk specifically about which position?
The engineer.
The engineering position. Yeah. So the other piece is the policy and programs manager, and I think some of the reason for expediting this is programs can take a really long time to develop. You don't just flip a switch and all of a sudden you have a new ordinance, and all of a sudden you have the forms and the fees and whatever it is that you're going to implement. That work, again, I would have liked to have started it probably a year ago, and so I already feel like we're behind the 8 ball and worry that if we don't get this moving, that we could be in a risky position, particularly if we know wastewater issues. And then the customer care position is largely to support the reclassification and the enrichment of the billing, the customer care and finance manager, so that that position can really focus on resolving all of these meter issues, bringing them to closure, and developing those SOPs so that they do not happen again, because we do not want them to happen again.
Okay, I'll just say last thing, I appreciate the presentation last week and the conversation tonight. I think either tonight or in some near future date, I think this will be just as influential as some of the reorganizations we've done at the city, thinking at our BD more recently and other as well. I think this is an incredible work that you've done, and I'm looking forward to having this move forward, maybe tonight, but if not, then sometime in the very near future.
Thank you, Councilor Roof. Councilor Pine will be followed by Franklin, and then Councilor.
Thank you, President. If I could just clarify, when you use the phrase legacy issues, is that the same as saying deferred maintenance? Is that really what that is?
I got it.
Is it just a nicer way of saying it? It's like a euphemism. It feels like it is.
So some of the issues we are facing stem from deferred capital investment over time. We had on the wastewater side projected that we would need to be bringing forward a capital plan for significant reinvestment in the wastewater plants, 2021, 2022. We emphasized that in our last year's budget presentation. The plants have historically had an upgrade every generation, and the time for this generation's role to play is now. What happened last summer was an incident that forced us to advance what was already going to be in 2, 3, or 4 out to happen in 4 months, where our team rushed to put together a plan. Had fortunately already had contracts with a number of technical leads in this community to help us put together the capital plan and to get it in front of the voters. So yes, part is infrastructure. Part is also our systems. The billing errors that our department uncovered and has diligently been tackling now for the last year have origins, some back as far as 3 decades prior. and we've been researching paper files. We've been researching the old database that we're no longer using to bring each one to close. We will be leaving a legacy here of a stronger program and a stronger team if we resource ourselves appropriately, and this plan is a key tool to helping address that as well as the infrastructure.
Sure, okay, that's helpful. I think I was once told that Burlington built a water facility, treatment facility for a community 3 times our size, expecting to be able to get communities nearby to participate, and then the Champlain Water District pretty much took our customers away. And so we had basically an infrastructure that was way beyond what we needed in anticipation of being able to sell that capacity to other communities. And I think it's just important to point out that as a result, there were repeated rate increases throughout the 80s and 90s that became a clarion call for residents telling the administration and the city council at the time, you are killing us on your rate increases. So when we look at the time period and say, why was there like a long stretch of time where there were no rate increases? The answer is because the public's saying, stop raising the water rate, figure out another way to meet your expenses. So there's just a little bit of history there that I think is important to acknowledge. I want to say that this staff, under the leadership of both Director Spencer and Megan Moore's leadership, I have the utmost faith in, and I respect their work, and I think that it's important for us to remember that when we ask these questions and ask for maybe a little bit more time, it's because we are elected by people to represent their interest, and in doing so sometimes it's difficult and uncomfortable, but I just want to reiterate that their capabilities and their leadership are something that I have the utmost respect for. And I think if we don't move forward tonight, it is really a result of, if quite honestly, feeling a little bit rushed. And I've been admitting to them both that I was unable to the level of this today, really, that I wanted to, given some family commitments, and it's just been there's a lot of information coming at us, so just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Councilor Pine. In fact, there was a time that I remember when we received a bill once every 3 months, rather than once every month. My apologies. Councilor Paulino is next, to be followed by Councilor Paul.
Thank you, President Wright. Director Moyer, I had some concerns about, so I'll start off with the staffing increases, just to see if I understand your numbers. So you write that $1.70 per month increase will be for FY 2020 for just these changes, and that's the 3 new positions and the 3 reclassifications. That's phase 1?
That is for phase 1 and phase 2. So that includes 5 additional positions and all of the reclassifications.
That's $20 a year for an average ratepayer
for an average ratepayer who uses 600 cubic feet a month.
So the request you're asking for is essentially $40 for the next 2 years for the average utility water user.
$40 over the 2 years, yes, but about $20 a year.
That's for phase 1 and 2.
Correct.
And if I, in response to your April 14th memo, you included a graph that had how many staffing changes you've had. And is it accurate that since 2015 you've only had 3 new additions despite all the different changes in services?
I'm trying to think of the graph that I provided you.
So it says 3,
the most recent position, yeah, go ahead.
I apologize. You didn't have a graph on that. It's more,
I always
it's
remember
in the
my
memo
graphs.
as to in direct response to the question about
Everybody, I need a reminder, for Channel 17, everyone has to stay right on their microphones.
So
I guess I think I narratively described it.
exactly.
The most recent staffing addition was the 3rd water resources engineer. Can you go to let's do slide 5. I think so the most recent staffing addition was the water resources engineer, which happened in 2017. Before that, in I think 2016, we added a 2nd water resources engineer, And then I believe the other most recent increase, our staffing increase was the water resources. It was the GIS and stormwater technician at the time, which we reclassified, I believe, last year into the water resources infrastructure asset manager.
So you're currently at 43 FTEs, and in 2015 you were 40.
Approximately, yes.
My last question was, going back to the dollar amount regarding staff increases, is it accurate to say that even if you do these 6 changes of phase 1, you're still within the average rate of increase per year?
Yes, so the total budgetary impact with both regular annual operating drivers as well as these post-staffing increase, phase 1 and phase 2, which is 5 positions plus reclassifications, we're currently modeling that rate increase to be about 4.5%. I believe over the past, I'm not sure how many years, our typical rate increase has been in the 4.2% range. And while communities do vary from one to another, when we look at the national averages, we're within the sort of normal tolerance of what water utilities are seeing. Again, you'd have to look more specifically at the data to compare us to other medium-sized, but generally medium and smaller water systems have higher costs because of the economy of scale.
And that's consistent with, looking back the last 10 years, the rate of increases have been, according to the graph on your responses, that's what I was thinking about, after page 6, 14th memo.
Councilor Paulino, you have to really stay on the microphone. I apologize because you're new at this, but if you're looking at your data, which it's easy to want to do, then you're sort of drifting away from the microphone. So for everybody, we got to really stay on the microphone. Thank you.
My last point is that 7 times in the last 10 years, the rate has been over 4.5, which is that number you were just talking about.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Paulino. Councilor Paul.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, so at the Board of Finance this evening, and actually I think it was also certainly brought forward at the work session, that one of the biggest concerns that I think we all have, and I think you have with this, is that this needs to be done. We need to move forward with this. We need to have better billing so that what happened doesn't happen again. We need to do this work. But we want to make sure that that work and these efforts do not fall on those who are least able to shoulder the cost. And you had said that that you have a number of ideas for how you could lessen the burden on those who are least able to afford it. And I know, Chapin, you had at the Board of Finance had given us some revised language that you wanted to propose to us in terms of the resolution. It was unfortunate that that came out very late in the conversation we had, but I think that in the interest of people being able to see it before we might get to the potential, the possibility of being able to vote on this evening or not, that language be introduced sooner rather than later, at least so that those who were not at the Board of Finance can hear it and understand the context. I think, if we do vote on this in 2 weeks, and certainly that opportunity is open to us, and it doesn't sound as if it's going to be, it would be crushing for that to happen, although not the ideal outcome. I don't want to put words in your mouth. That would potentially give you time to further develop some of the ideas that could potentially be more just ideas, but a little bit more found numbers if you had the opportunity to have a couple of weeks more to develop that. And so I hope that you would speak to that as well. Thank you.
Sure. I'll start off in just saying, your department is 100% committed to doing a rate analysis, to doing a full evaluation of affordability programs and other incentives. We are currently working to procure a team to help us with that. This is complex work. It is not something that we can have ready in time for FY20, but we are already underway so that we can be ready for FY21. I do have draft language that could be inserted into the resolution, should it be friendly to the council, because we share your commitment to exploring ways to work with our ratepayers and balance needs and of various ratepayers. And so we are suggesting, should the council be interested of adding a be it further resolved clause that says that the council directs the department to evaluate alternative rate structures and affordability programs to minimize the impact on low-income and low-use customers, engage the public in the development and review of those options, and present the findings to the City Council for its consideration prior to the FY21 budget presentation.
Thank you, President Wright. So could I just, we don't have the resolution on the screen, but do you have a proposal for where you thought you wanted that to go in terms of the lines? Just so we can all have the opportunity of, well, I mean, proposal, I don't mean to say that it would obviously have to be proposed by one of us and then seconded, but if you have a
Would it go at the end of the?
That would be the thought, that it would go at the end of the resolution.
Okay.
All right, thank
So
you.
if someone wanted to move that language, it would go, the place that would make sense would go at the end.
Would you like me to share the more concrete ideas, or?
Well, I think the language that you're proposing should be disseminated to us. If there is a way that you can do that easily,
Let's see if we can get that language up on the board. In the meantime, are you all set, Councilor Paul?
Yeah, I would be willing to propose that as an amendment, but I would prefer to let others be able to see it first.
Yes, so let's get that there, and in the meantime, we'll go forward. We have some other councilors. One thing I want to just, as mentioned to me by a couple of councilors, and I agree, is I know there is some desire, I don't know where the votes are, to postpone action and deal with this in 2 weeks. If that's where we end up going, I just don't want to have a full-blown 2 or 3 hour debate tonight and then postpone action until the next debate, until the next meeting. But having said that, Councilor Busher is up next, to be followed by Councilor Jang, Councilor Freeman, Councilor Tracy.
So thank you, President Wright. To pick up a little bit on what Councilor Paul was talking about, at the Board of Finance, I think that really the focus has been on trying to balance the needs of the department with the long-term impact on the taxpayer/ratepayer, and also our retirement system. And I think that that really is the crux of this. When I looked at, when we left the work session, I left with more knowledge than I came in with. Thank you very much. But I also left with an understanding that there would be 3 new positions added. And when I got the packet and the information for tonight, not only were there 3 positions, and they weren't the same ones, but there was also some reclassifications. And when I looked at all of this, this made a bigger financial impact for me than I had originally thought. One of the engineers, one of the positions, the engineer, currently exists. They're a limited service position, so they don't have retirement benefits, but we currently have them on board. So financially, I didn't see that adding much. However, it would be a change. And so I just want you to know I did explore earlier this evening whether or not we could continue using that position as limited service, and then consider in the next year or so, once we had made all these other changes and shifted some of the workload from the engineers, consider whether or not we then bring that person on board full-time as a permanent position, excuse me. So having said that, and Megan, you referenced this earlier, that in an ideal, and Chapin, you did also, in an ideal world, the process would have been different. In an ideal world, we would have a way to provide relief to the ratepayer and taxpayer. We would know how we were going to do that before we imposed a rate increase. We would have known when we went to the voters, we would have been able to say that this was a cumulative, this was a package. This was a package for a bond, and this was a package for some additional staffing. Now, the bond does include 1.25 FTEs, one of those being an engineer to go with the work that is associated with the bond. I'm not sure what the other 0.25, maybe that's contingency, I don't really know what that is, but anyways. So there is that, but I think it would have been better if we could have said this is where we're going and this is why we need all of these positions. So I think that having said that, I think that's why we find ourselves where we are tonight, because it hasn't been ideal. We as elected officials want to understand. It started with Councilor Roof asking, you know, what's the impact to, you know, and what's the benefit to the customer, what's the impact on the customer? That's what you asked at the work session. And I think, you know, that's what we're trying to be responsive to. So that the language that you are providing is a step in the right direction. But I think I still would wonder if in 2 weeks you could make that stronger and give it a better and more depth to that. President Wright asked, well, we certainly don't want to impact people, low and moderate income people, but he was worried about the people, middle income people. How are we going to do that? And what about businesses? Really, you know, how are we going to frame this? Because it's a balancing act and it's delicate. So I think that there's a lot to contemplate, and that's why I asked the question at the Board of Finance, what would it do to the department if we were to delay action for 2 weeks? Because I feel that I haven't heard from everybody around the table, and I myself feel like I'm still trying to pull this together. So anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Busher. Councilor Jang, then Councilor Freeman and Tracy.
Thank you, and I have to definitely apologize to Megan. Yeah, because, you know, this weekend, this morning, 6 a.m., you sent an email, and we've been communicating, and you never stopped. Any question that I ask, before 10 minutes, you reply back. I want to thank you for that. And time also, the great work you did at last Monday to do a presentation, it was thorough. But what I want to say about this is basically when we were talking about the bounds here, 30 million bound utility, I was the only councillor who did not vote for it. And I think I provided my reason why. But this plan today in front of me, it is basically a combination, a continuation of what you started. And these actually give me confidence that things will get better. Right? And I think you did an incredible job in just presenting it to us. And to Councilor Polino's point, we are talking about an addition of $20 per year to a regular customer who's using 600 cubicle or less. We're talking about that. Right? In 2 years, it will be $40, right? So I am apologizing to you why we are here trying to delay this work. I'm apologizing for that. But at the same time, I think Council President Wright did ask a wonderful question at the Board of Finance. And I think it will be important for you to come back to bring an answer to it. And the question was about, will this reclarification and adding 3 new positions will be at least guaranteeing that our infrastructure and the water distribution, the water meters, will be functioning greatly. How did you respond to that? I think it is important for also the viewers and everybody to get a sense of that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I understand where you all are coming from, even if it is hard, I will admit. As far as will it guarantee? I have quickly learned after taking this job that there are no guarantees, and that things can happen even if you think you are doing planning in the timelines that you need to do them in. I think that without this additional staffing, I have very strong concerns about my ability and my existing staff's ability to weather, to keep the ship moving forward and to weather the next possible thing that I don't know will happen when it happens. So there is a universe of planned things which I try to get my hands around every day, and in water resources, in part because of climate change, in part because of aging infrastructure, these legacy issues, things that we don't even realize. The volume of unplanned work every day undermines our ability to work on the important programmatic generational things that move us forward. And so there are no guarantees, but I won't say that I'll guarantee you that we're going to fail, because I will not let that happen, even if I end up somewhere else. Is that I need this. I would not be bringing it to you except having many months working with the consultants to figure out what's the minimal amount that we can do that will get us pointed more in the right direction and give me it's like showing up to a soccer game with 9 people or 8 people every single Saturday. At some point, your existing players, they can't do it, and you can do so much more. You can make these amazing plays if you have enough team members, and it's the only way I can think about it as an athlete. So, 2 weeks, I will hold on, and we will try to give you more data, more indication of why we brought this forward, and maybe more indication of how we think these affordability programs will address the concern. But I mostly just appreciate you guys being willing to continue asking questions and being curious. I don't take any of this as you thinking it's not a good idea. You just want to understand more.
And lastly, I think the voters did at 90%, over 90% vote in favor of passing this. So basically, I can say that this is like a green light from the community members. And I will not go to someone and say, this is an addition. It's going to be very easy to explain. Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jang. I have 3 councillors in the queue, and then soon I want to get either a motion to move the resolution or a motion to postpone action, and with or without the language. By the way, the language that Councillor Paul asked for is now up on the board and can be seen. Councillor Freeman, to be followed by Councillor Tracy, and then Councillor Roof. Councillor Freeman, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you both again so much. As Councillor Jang just mentioned, I've been sort of just blown away by how responsive you both have been, and so willing to connect and touch base with all of us. And for me, there's a lot that I'm getting up to speed on. Really understanding how the organizational structure of water resources and DPW was working and how this is going to impact it. And so, yeah, you've both just been so receptive, and I appreciate it. And I understand it is a stressor, and I appreciate so many others bringing up the fact that delaying even 2 weeks is a stressor. So don't want to diminish that impact at all. I am personally strongly in favor of that 2-week delay. I think some of the concerns that some others have raised have been sort of ones that I've felt, which is really, if we're going to incur these long-term expenses, to really understand the nuts and bolts of how that's going to impact ratepayers. And that's, I think, just really primarily, and sort of also just maybe needing to, it's a lot to process, and just needing to sit with it. A week it does feel like a short amount of time, and I apologize for just needing some time to sit with it. But I'm so in the sense that the timeline, there's a sense of there is some sense of urgency around it, and I understand, based on some other conversations that I've had with, that there are aspects and ways that the department has been putting resourced for some time, and that we now have sort of this incidental bad timing with two folks going on leave, which is creating sort of this perfect storm. And so I just want to understand, I think in the broader context, perhaps these organizational changes have been needed for a long time, but I don't really understand. I suppose folks go on leave, and how, that it's incidentally bad timing, but there's no, this is just a really actually very specific question about when departments have key sort of actors like in stormwater who go on leave. How is that? Because I understand it's incidentally bad timing now, but I'm just curious how that, just to better understand how that would just play out in any other circumstance normally.
Yeah,
Yep.
I would say that it can happen for any number of reasons, from medical situation to a family situation happening, and sometimes those things aren't planned. These fall into something that's been known for a while, but is a family obligation that both need to attend to. And it's my duty, if need be, and if there's a 2-week delay here, to look at, do we bring in temporary staff or other solutions to get us through? It's just hard to bring in a temp as you're trying to train somebody who's, you know, it's a difficult transition.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying on that. That was more, I was just wondering if there are, you know, if people bring in temps or in sort of an interim
And
solution.
I guess it's the cumulative impact of the other work that we have going on. For instance, one of my major concerns with the stormwater program manager going on leave is stormwater review and basically the stuff in stormwater. If my engineers, my existing 3 engineers, were not completely flat out trying to build water lines and get things moving with the Clean Water Resiliency Plan, I could probably have a little bit more of them to keep it afloating. Additionally, I am also going out on leave, and I'm the one who holds the rest of the stormwater expertise. I could be providing that function, but I am going out 20 days later than this other person. And so it is a bit of a perfect storm, and I wish, and I will be thinking about this in the future, to have my organization have enough resiliency that we can tolerate which are normal things. I want people to be able to go and be with their kid or their family for 3 months and not have to worry about this place. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you clarifying that. And
Yep. It's a little bit particular to the situation of the people who are going out.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Freeman. Councilor Tracy.
Thank you, President Wright, and I also wanted to extend thanks for all the conversation that you've been willing to extend to us with regards to this. I specifically appreciated the clarification that you provided with regards to the efforts that you've had to reach out to unionized folks. I think that's particularly important, making sure that we're working well with our collective bargaining units and doing proper outreach to make sure that when we do make a change to the size or scope of a bargaining unit, that's done so that we do so collaboratively. So I do appreciate that. I think that, you know, with more time, it might be helpful to understand a little bit from their side, and specifically directly from them. We've heard from managers who want to plan to come forward, but I think that it could be helpful to hear a little bit from the union specifically, and I think that that's one of the things that having more time would allow us to do. On the other hand, I also think that this is something that, as I said before, I think that there is a need to also check in with the public and really give folks a chance to understand that, you know, this would be essentially 70 council, you know, was referencing and is in your prior presentations, which is a significant addition to a monthly cost to your average water user. And again, there is that cumulative effect, although that will be taking impact, you know, as the bond starts to hit, but there are several other bonds and costs that are continuing to build for voters. So I think that giving them a clear understanding of what it is that this might actually do in terms of driving costs would be helpful. And so I think that having a little bit of time to flush out what exactly that would look like, and giving folks just a chance to engage, you know, our wonderful public outreach specialist, Rob Goulding, to have him push out some messages around that would be very helpful as well. And then finally, I think that there's also, you know, I don't like this idea of developing something that's as significant and as important as dealing with, you know, looking at alternative rate structures in the context of an fly. was presented at the very end of Board of Finance, and it's a very general amendment. It speaks to very general sort of terms, that we're committed to this, that we will engage the public, and that, we will provide these at least on a very vague timeline of before the 21 budget cycle. Well, that doesn't deal with really how we get there and some of the other process steps that, for instance, you shared a memo with me with regards to how you've tried to engage a consultant to deal with this work, and there was a lot of great specificity in there. I think that we could bring a lot of that specificity of what we're asking from the consultant into the process as to how we're going to be developing alternative rate structures and in this, so that we give clarity to the public that, we're not just doing this in some sort of general statement, but that we're really laying out the process steps where we're going to try and check in with them. So outlining that public engagement for dealing with alternative rate structures, and then also clarifying the strategies by which we are going to do that. I do think that we need to take our time and at least, if we're going to need to have lots more process around alternative rate structures, but I think that setting forward a process instead of just having a vague amendment would be a lot more, would get me a lot further towards supporting this particular plan. So for those reasons, the desire to see, to get the clarity directly from the bargaining unit around their feelings on this, the desire to see more public engagement over the next 2 weeks, and then also the desire to see a more fleshed out process whereby we'd be able to move forward on this conversation of alternative rate structures. I'm certainly in favor of delaying a little bit, and I think that through that delay I'd be able to get that information and feel a lot more comfortable with this.
Thank you, Councilor.
Wait, I'm not done. So so what I would like to do is I would like to move to postpone to time certain the April 29th meeting.
Councilor Tracy has moved to postpone action on this item until the April 29th meeting. Second, Councilor Hanson.
Point of order, President Wright. I don't think there's a resolution on the floor to amend.
That is true. We have not made, the resolution has not been moved. City Attorney's Office, can we postpone on action on something without putting it on without actually having the motion on the floor? Can this action be postponed without that first initial action?
I mean, we're putting amendments on, there are amendments that are being discussed on the floor before the resolution's been moved. So, I mean, we've come too far down this rabbit hole already.
I can't have different councilors taking the floor and speaking without being recognized. Give the city attorney a moment. If you have no, do you have any? No. Okay, I'm going to make the call. That is, I believe that this can be put on the floor without this having been moved. So it's simply calling for postponing action on this. We haven't actually got it on a motion on the floor for the resolution, but we're moving to postpone action on it. So debate on the motion to postpone. Councilor Paulino.
I want to go back to what Ms. Moyer said, that, there are 43 FTEs waiting for relief. And by not taking action for 2 weeks, it sends a message to 43 city employees on what I feel is a non-controversial item regarding wastewater and clean water. And I started off by addressing the numbers because I feel that the impact is significant. It's $20 a year, but it's also important to recognize that the staffing changes haven't been made in the last 10 years, the increases haven't been made in the last 10 years. And that's why I think the request is far reasonable, especially for phase one.
Thank you, Councilor Paulino. Councilor Shannon.
Thank you, President Wright. I think that around the table, we all value clean water, and we know that our constituents value clean water. We know that we've had a very serious problem delivering clean water in terms of quality, and we have had breaches of our system that have contaminated the lake. We've just come out of a vote where I can't recall anything ever passing with 92% of the vote. I think the message from our constituents is really clear. They have no higher priority. And a two-week delay is not a long time if no accidents happen. But a 2-week delay with a list of risks that we're trying to mitigate to make sure that we don't further contaminate the lake. If something happens, that's on us. And that's not something that I want to be responsible for. Something could still happen. We can pass it and something will still happen, but at least we know we've done the best that we can to avoid it. And we can't say that if we vote to delay this at this point. I do appreciate that this is complicated, but I think that that's why we had the work session a week ago, to try and get this conversation started so that we didn't have to do it all in one night. And I do appreciate that there are continuing concerns about the rate structure, and I think that that is shared around the table as well. There's, you know, an amendment that we have briefly seen there that deals with that a little bit, but we're not adopting any rates tonight or any rate structure. And I think that we can further address this when we adopt the budget, we adopt our water rates. And I think that the desire to work further on this could be addressed at that time in those budget resolutions and get further detail if we can add the amendment that was offered earlier tonight, and then continue to work on that in our budget resolutions. I think that that would suffice, because I can't support postponing this, knowing that if something happens, it's on us. And there is no higher priority for this community, and I don't think there's probably a higher priority for anybody around the table either. We've gone through a really thorough process. Everybody has acknowledged the responsiveness of staff to try and answer every single question. We've had multiple memos that have been very, very thorough. I do appreciate it's a lot to absorb, but I think we have to move forward with this. So I will not be supporting a motion to postpone, and I hope that we have the opportunity to move this forward tonight, because it should have been done yesterday. Tomorrow.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Councilor Hanson.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you all so much, and this has been very thorough. And I too share, you know, the fact that this is a huge priority and feel the sense of urgency. I think postponing by 2 weeks does maintain a sense of urgency. That still is a fast timeline, but what it does is it allows for some public input, which we haven't really had yet, or I haven't, if there has been, I haven't seen it, and I haven't had the opportunity to connect with my constituents around this issue, because I've been trying to, you know, wrap my head around it myself. So I think it's beneficial to be able to get that input, because especially in the wake of the bond items that were passed by the voters, folks are sensitive to price increases. That was one of the biggest issues out there, talking to folks in my neighborhood, is the continual rising cost of living, and this is a part of that. So I think it is helpful to hear from them. And part of why I think it's important as well is because I think many voters, rightfully or wrongfully so, many voters, when they made this huge investment, in which they overwhelmingly did support, many of them thought that this was fixing the problem. And that may have been misinformation, or they may have been misguided on that, but that was the perception of many people, is that, all right, we're willing to make this huge expenditure, but it's going to solve this problem. So for them to do that, and then without having been reached out to and without having been engaged, to then get hit pretty quickly with an additional increase, I think could cause some folks to be upset or felt misled. I think it's really important for the public to have the opportunity to kind of understand this before we move, which we haven't had yet. So that's why I would support moving it. But I am very supportive of it, I do expect to be supporting it in 2 weeks if that's when we vote on it, and that's when I would like to vote on it. And I am hopeful that through reaching out to the public and discussing it, we will not only have folks more supportive and understand this better and understand the needs better, be more supportive to you all and to us and our process, and I think it will pass. I am hopeful about that, but that's why I'll be moving to just push it back just by two more weeks.
Thank you, Councilor Hanson. Councilor Roof, and then Councilor Mason.
I didn't know what was next. All right, so someone said we do a lot around this table, and we send a lot of messages, right? Tonight, whatever we do, we'll send a message to staff, we'll send a message to the community, we'll send a message to each other. And I think that, this issue, I don't hear anyone around the table disagreeing that there's a need here and that we want to see this happen. I think what we're talking about is very down in the weeds, and we're talking about, okay, we're talking about process, and we're talking about how are we going to fund it, right? Are there more progressive ways, progressive ways of looking at funding this? And I look at it as an opportunity. And I'll repeat what I said before. I really do hope that this council, whether tonight or in 2 weeks, does move this forward because it is critical. More so, I think from my perspective on this side of the table, from the first meeting of this new council, I think we need to be cognizant and aware that as councilors, we should not be digging our heels in one side table to another, right? We should be pitting risk of disaster to our ecosystem with public outreach, right? That's an unfair, I think, I'm going to speak truthfully here, I think that's an unfair dichotomy. I think it's an unfair framework. And I don't think that those people who are making those points are intentionally making that framework. And so I just want to bring that up because I think that as a new council, we should be striving towards, in these opportunities where there's a lot of consensus, to try to get there. And I want to get there, and I don't want to see tonight a 6-6 vote. So I'm hopeful that one way or the other, we can talk through this here and find an outcome that the big message that we send is to the public that this council is ready to work and ready to get things done, maybe not unanimously every time, as President Wright said at the beginning of the meeting, but if we go 6-6, 6-6 in this council, we're going to send a message to this community that we're not going to be operating well. And we should use this item, this issue, as an opportunity to come together and figure this thing out. So I'll listen to the rest of the debate. I think I know where I'm going to vote, but I want to hear the rest of the folks out. And I just want that to resonate in people's mind here for a little bit while we wrap up this item.
Thank you, Councilor Roof. Councilor Mason.
Thank you, President Wright. I will not be supporting the motion to postpone for 2 weeks. I've listened to the articulation of the reasons behind the delay, and I'm not convinced that the opportunity for public input or for sort of coming up with alternative rate structures is going to happen in the next 2 weeks. We've heard tonight, the plan to engage a consultant and then work with that consultant. That's a complicated process. It's going to take over a year. While I appreciate the efforts you've put in, I'm not confident that 2 weeks is going to make a difference. In that, I'm also looking to you and very confident. I know Councilor Tracy raised some concerns about wanting to sort of come up with the process now. I am confident that you will commit to working with the council to sort of solicit our input in terms of what that public process should look like when that consultant is engaged. And I'm seeing you shaking your heads yes, which to me gives me enough comfort knowing now that I will, vote to move this forward with the understanding that there will be a further conversation about that public process once the consultant is engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mason. Other councilors, or Councilor Jang, and then Councilor Pine.
So I think I am not sure if I will be voting to support the motion of postponing. And the reasons are here. Because all I heard, the reason why people want to postpone, 3 things. Engage the community, work with the union, and the third one, explore how to mitigate and I think that point, you made it clear. It cannot happen in 2 weeks, right? And I cannot see a way to engage the community in 2 weeks. The platform we have is the NPAs. NPAs, none of them may be, you cannot meet with all of them within the 2 weeks. And at the same time, You asking to postpone, asking the administration, the department to go talk to the community, or you, as city councilors, need to go back and talk to our constituents. I think it's not clear. To me, we have a proposal, very well vetted, in front of us. We need to move this forward tonight and sending a message to the 43 staff that we are here. We hear you for over years. You've been not taking seriously. The most essential service that anybody in the city can get, the best one of them of all. But for $20 a year, we want to postpone. And not to even mention that the voters already voted in favor of this. There won't be a person that you talk to say you will have a $1 addition bill to your water. That being a problem. I mean, thank you. I'm not supporting it.
Thank you, Councilor Jane. Councilor Pine.
I just want to make a point which I think is perhaps obvious, but we're all enjoying the benefits of clean water right here tonight. I don't think it's fair to cast any of us who are looking to get a couple more weeks of deliberation and outreach to our constituents as somehow not supporting the clean water, clean lake. I think we have an obligation to our constituents, and we all respond differently to that, and we engage with our constituents in different ways, and we're not telling anyone how to do that, but we all have our own ways of doing that, and I think our obligation is to proceed ahead, but proceed ahead in a way that ensures we're not leaving folks behind, and we're not adding insult to injury for folks who are struggling day in and day out. I have a neighbor who struggles and literally at certain times in the month lives on baked potatoes, and I'm not kidding. And so when we talk about $20 as though it's nothing, for my neighbor, $20 is a lot. So please don't disparage those of us who are asking for postponement over what you think is a small amount of money, because for some people it actually means whether they eat or not. So please, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pine. Any other councilor who wants to motion to postpone action until the next meeting? Councilor Shannon.
I'm sorry. I got too much stuff. I just want to note that we're not voting on money tonight. We're voting on staff restructuring.
Continue, Councilor Shannon.
We're not voting on any budget changes.
Yes, they are.
Well, Councilor Shannon has the floor. Councilor Shannon has the floor.
Okay, well, people are disagreeing with this, and I'd like to understand what that disagreement is, because I did see some salary amounts in there, but my understanding is that we are not voting on budget changes in this resolution. So if I'm wrong, I'd like to be corrected.
Well, we would hear from staff on that.
So the resolution in front of the council articulates the reclaiming of a number of positions and the creation of positions. We have sufficient funds in FY19 for these moves. These moves in total will drive a cost pressure, modest, in FY20 that would contribute $1.70 to the increased rate in FY20. So I think that the comment you heard is there is no vote to a budget amendment here for 19, but it would drive change to the FY20 budget that will come to the council here in the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you. My understanding of the objections is the rate structure rather than whether or not we need to do this. So that rate structure discussion is going to be a much longer discussion. It's not a 2-week discussion. In terms of getting constituent feedback, I feel very confident that my constituents want to do everything that we can to have a clean lake. And I do appreciate that for some of my neighbors as well, $20 is meaningful. At the same time, I know those same neighbors really get, the water quality to them is as important as it is to everybody else. And I don't think that we're going to be changing that in this process or in the next 2 weeks. We've also had the opportunity, I think it's really on us, we need constituent input. We need to reach our constituents. We had a work session last week with a lot of details on this. And if we need constituent input, I don't think that we should be putting this at risk for another 2 weeks because we didn't get constituent input. I don't see a whole outcry of people showing up here. Our meetings are warned. We put out posts on Front Porch Forum about what's on our agendas. And people aren't here telling us, you can't do that. People want a clean lake. They want us to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Councilor Roof.
I'm going to shift back over to you. If postponement guy sitting here, frankly, not clear exactly what we're asking for what to happen in those 2 weeks. I know that there's ideas, and I just want to make sure that they're fleshed out. From your perspective, with those 2 weeks, what will you do with it? Because there's no direction from the motion, and I don't think there needs to be necessarily, but for my sake and certainly for your sake, what exactly we're going to be doing here. And maybe the acute question for me is, it's about funding, right? It's about making sure we're not overburdening folks that can't pay. Is 2 weeks enough time to develop out a pricing system? What I don't want is my genuine concern here is coming back in 2 weeks and still not having the answers that I think people have the right to want. And so that's a couple of questions there, so I'll stop.
One, we can embark on some additional public notification. I think I heard some councilors we put out some additional notification that could be done. In addition, I heard some desire to flesh out the resolution. In the next 2 weeks, we can't substantively advance the rate restructuring and program innovation work, but if requested by the council, we could look at further detail on the resolution.
Just quick follow-up. I would assume, just knowing, having worked with you two now for a couple of years now, with or without that in the resolution, I feel as though, and I'm just looking for validation on this, that you would be pursuing those aggressively anyways. Can you just either confirm or deny that assumption?
Correct. We have already issued the request for qualifications, which I provided to you all. We are interviewing the consultants, I believe, the beginning of May. Any contract, the master service contract that we anticipate executing, and certainly any scope work specifically deal with this work, would come to the Board of Finance at a minimum, if not the City Council, depending on the value of the work. And so there will be some future opportunities for specific engagement and what the scope of work is with that consultant. And after we've had some time with the consultant, who are national experts, or that's a requirement for them as part of the qualifications, in specifically these affordability issues. I can certainly enumerate the top 3 things that I think we will be looking at as part of this, but I anticipate going as deep as a dive as possible to literally leave no stone unturned as far as potential revenue sources that may be out there that don't impact residential users, and also various alternative rate structures. Also have attended an affordability conference, worked with Chapin and was a mayor pro conference that spent, I believe, 2 days looking at all the different affordability measures that we could include. And absolutely, I mean, as I've said, as I've taken over this role and seen the expenses that we have and our revenue challenges, it quickly became clear that we were going to have to figure out a different way of finding the money to keep running our system and making improvements.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Roof. I have 2 more councilors in the queue, and then I think we really should be heading toward a vote here. Councilor Busher, and then Councilor Hanson.
So thank you. I will be supporting the motion to postpone. And I guess the way I've looked at this is I've talked to the head of the department, and the water resource director, and I've tried to figure out, taking the recommendations from the consultant and tried to figure out if there were other ways to accomplish the needs of the department without actually adding the dollar amount that is being proposed. I feel that is my job. And what would I do with those 2 weeks? I would continue to try to work with the department to better understand it and bring forward my thoughts on this. You know, when you look at this, you've got 5 positions. You've got 5 positions ultimately that are going to come to be in FY20. And you've got 3 reclassifications. And you've got a lot of other departments coming forward with more reclassifications and more budgetary impacts. And I feel that this council really needs to be looking at headcount and where are we, the private sector, or are we the public sector? Where are we setting our salary ranges? What are we doing here? And can we as a community afford this? We already know people can't move into Burlington because they can't afford it. But my fear is that people are going to have to leave Burlington because they can't afford it. So that's the premise. I will still be working really hard to educate myself, to better understand, and to get added language in how you're going to address the rate structure. I do think we'd be better served with knowing a little bit more. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Busher. Councilor Hanson, and then I would like to move to a vote.
So for me, I'm very supportive of what you all are trying to do, and I do have faith that you are working towards a more progressive rate structure. I think what I would like to see in change to it would just kind of flushing that commitment out just for the public so that folks could understand that commitment if they are going to be hit with this increase, knowing that in the near future, next year, they would be seeing some relief and some changes to that. I think that's really critical. And I think having the 2 weeks, how I would use it would be to reach out to constituents who, as Brian kind of alluded to, this has a different impact than it does on me. And also to say that, you know, I support this because I've had this opportunity to learn so much from you. I think the public, if they had the opportunity to understand that, will also support it. I do think that, but I'd like to give them that opportunity, and I just think overall, going to Councilor Roof's point, the process is important, and making people feel like they've had a chance to weigh in rather than learning about something after the fact and getting upset because they don't know all the details around it. I think that was something that came up time and time again. The past couple months when I was knocking on doors was not so much, oh, I hate the decisions that are being made, but it was that I don't feel included. I feel that things were rushed. I feel like my input wasn't valued. So I think it's important to set that precedent, and this is an opportunity to set the stage as having that collaboration and really valuing that public input. On an item that feels like it is extremely likely to pass, potentially unanimously in 2 weeks' time, but the value of bringing the public along as well, I think is tremendous, and will allow us to be active in other ways on future items going forward.
Thank you, Councilor Hanson. The clerk shall call the roll, please.
Councilor Bushor?
Yes.
Councilor Hanson?
Yes.
Councilor Jang? No. Councilor Paulino?
No.
Councilor Freeman?
Yes.
Councilor Mason?
No.
Councilor Paul?
Yes.
Councilor Pine?
Yes.
Councilor Roof?
Yes.
Councilor Shannon?
No.
Councilor Tracy?
Yes.
City Council President Wright?
Yes. The motion to postpone passes by, I believe, by a vote of 8-4. We have postponed action on that item until our next meeting on April 29th. We will now move ahead to committee reports. Oh, I'm sorry. All right. I missed item 4.02. That is a communication from the city attorney's office that was pulled off consent regarding the annual report on livable wage ordinance.
Thank you. Our office just really wanted to give an update, which is required every year, but wanted to verbalize it, sort of bring the council up to speed on the exciting work we've been doing in conjunction with the Worker Center and the Clerk Treasurer's Office. Really, I think this year, I don't need to go through the sort of every audit that we've done. I did provide that report. If there are questions, we're happy to answer. But I think the really exciting things that we are moving forward with an increased number of audits, so moving from a complaint-driven system one where we are proactively with our colleagues at the Worker Center identifying contracts or projects where it makes sense to check in and check compliance, and we're always working on education first and trying to raise awareness and compliance with the ordinance. In that vein, we're getting ready. We're having our first time where we work with the Worker Center to actually do trainings with employees prior to construction season so they can help with the awareness issues. Also, we are continuing as well to be the compliance mechanism, and that happened again this past year where we're working on when contractors do not follow the livable wage. There are in the ordinance certain enforcement mechanisms involving, first off, we always make sure we get restitution for workers, but there are municipal tickets of time that someone can contract will actually prevent people from doing work with the city if they've been found to be sort of repeat offenders, or if we don't feel are taking the ordinance seriously enough. So I think our office just really wanted to share that it has been really a good last year for the ordinance. We did also provide, we have our central database now for contracts that are livable wage eligible. We get the certification forms. We share that as well with the Worker Center so that we're better able to identify where projects are happening and when, which helps to better outreach and compliance efforts.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the City Attorney's Office? Hearing none, Councilor Busher for a motion.
Yes, I'll move to accept this report and place it on for next second. I just want to comment.
Second, Councilor Jen. Councilor Busher.
My understanding is that this report, which is an excellent report, was written by Attorney James, and I just want to thank you so much for it. And it was very informative, and I was excited that this was not complaint-driven, but actually it was an audit, and we found somebody who needed to be educated and didn't want to be, but anyways, and you've got some work to be done. But this is a long shot from when we just had a livable wage ordinance and nobody ever checked. So thank the Attorney's Office and everyone involved in compiling this. Great.
Thank you, Councilor Busher. Any other further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of Councilor Busher's motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Item number 5 is committee reports. Committees have just now been reformed, so there probably hasn't been any meetings, but any committee chair who wants to speak? Councilor Roof.
The License Committee will have its first meeting this Wednesday at 5:30 in room 12. We'll be dealing with a lot of renewals, so there'll be a lot of stuff coming from that. Next Wednesday, I'm sorry, not this Wednesday, thank you, Councilor Tracy. Also, Public Safety will be meeting, actually, that's to be determined, so forget that. Also, the Vehicle for Hire Licensing Board, which is a rock and roll committee for sure. We'll be meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. in room 12 as well, so if you want to come and check that one out.
Thank you, Councilor Roof. Any other chair? Councilor Pine.
The Community Development and Neighborhood Revitalization Committee will meet next Monday because we don't really like having Mondays as a meeting. We thought we'd schedule a meeting on Monday at DPO at 5, and we'll be discussing the annual plan for how the city allocates the community development block grant dollars. And I want to welcome Councilor Chang to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pine. Any other chair?
You're coming back.
Hearing none, we'll close that item out and go to item number 6, which is city councilors on general city affairs. Any councilor on general city affairs? Councilor Busher.
So I just wanted to report on our last, the East District NPA, and just give the council a heads up. There was a resolution that was passed that I hope a copy will come to the council, asking, and the resolution was to request some additional funding for the East District to actually potentially consider small grants that could be utilized for small projects in the district. This is reminiscent of the CDBG block grant funds that we had that were given per ward. And also the money would be used for live streaming so that people that were not present but were available could potentially engage more actively in the meeting. So that's one thing. The second topic was that the director of DPW came and there was a lively debate about sidewalks. And there was a request, a big request, made to the department asking that potentially they do a slab at a time as opposed to a whole section of sidewalk when there is a slab or a couple of slabs that are in real need and they're disrupt people's ways, people in wheelchairs, et cetera, who can't navigate and are forced to go on the street. So there was a request to potentially have a fund that would be able to respond to those kinds of requests. And so I just thought I'd let everyone know about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Busher. Any other councilor on general city affairs? Councilor Shannon, then Councilor Pine.
Thank you, President Wright. I wanted to remind people about an event that's happening May 1st that you probably got an email about, which is the Burlington 2030 District Annual Celebration. It's May 1st from 5 to 7 at Main Street Landing. And the 2030 District, it actually is a voluntary program to get large property owners to benchmark their buildings for greater energy efficiency, and it's a very important activity to fight climate change that we're doing here in Burlington. And at this celebration, you will have an opportunity to meet some of the property owners that are participating in it and the goals of the program. And it's pretty exciting. You know, right now it's starting with really the biggest property owners, but it could be coming to a duplex near you in the near future. And it's something that I think we should all be engaged in. So I hope to see some of you there May 1st. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Councilor Pine, and then Mason.
Just want to extend an invitation to my fellow councilors that the Vermont Council on World Affairs is bringing some Jordanian mayors and elected officials to Burlington, and I often hold hand up and say, host it, so that way it's right in the workplace. I can just walk upstairs. So I invite you all because it's a big room and it's a conference room. So everyone's welcome. It's next Thursday, the 18th, 3 p.m. I don't know exactly how many, but it's a pretty good-sized group, and there'll be obviously an interpreter there. VEIC is at 128 Lakeside Avenue. So take the elevator to the top floor, and you'll find us.
Thank you, Councilor Pine. Councilor Mason.
Thank you, President Wright. Continuing the theme put forth by Councilors Pine and Shannon, the Ward 5 NPA is hosting, or will be holding its meeting this Thursday. The meeting is pretty much dedicated to climate change. It's 6:45, and it'll be held at City Market Community Room, 207 Flynn Ave, starting at 6:30. Jenny Green from BED will be presenting on the Climate Action Plan at 6:45. 7:40 to 8:40, climate change panel consisting of Senator Representative Sullivan, Sandra O'Flaherty from Citizens Climate Lobby, and Julie McCouga from 350 Vermont. Public is invited to attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mason. Anyone else on general city affairs? Hearing none, I will close that item out. And item number 7 is Council President update. This will actually close us out tonight. The mayor's dealing with a personal issue right now. So the only update I have is that I need to, on the Winooski Avenue Transportation Study, I need to replace Councilor Nodell as the council rep there. And I'm appointing Councilor Tracy to serve as the rep on that committee. Okay? All right?
I didn't know. I didn't ask. But okay.
Well, like it or not, you're the one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Tracy. And that's it for me. The motion moved by Councilor Roof, by Councilor Pine. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.